Okay, well, I'll get started. Um, Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to this afternoon's webinar on community organizing and volunteer opportunities here in Vermont around the COVID-19 pandemic. We have some really great organizers that are joining us. They're going to share some of their expertise and hopefully get some more folks plugged into relief efforts around the state. My name is Maeve Power. I'm usually on the climate and energy team with VPIRG, but I'm now focusing a bit more heavily on our COVID-19 response. As many of you know, VPIRG has been working since 1972 to advance our mission of promoting and protecting the health of Vermont's people, its environment, and its locally based economy. And especially in these, challenging and uncertain times, we are really committed to upholding that mission. And we're doing that by prioritizing urgent initiatives like ensuring safe and timely elections, combating scams and consumer abuses, which I'm sure we've all seen examples of, and supporting our local communities in whatever way we can. We're also finding new ways like this webinar to connect with our members, support our community, and provide opportunities for virtual action and engagement. So as our guests begin to share some of the ways that you can get involved in your local community, you can feel free to submit questions whenever they occur to you down in the chat, and you can access that down at the bottom bar of the Zoom window. Click the chat icon, it should pop up on the right. I'll be monitoring that and presenting those questions to our guests whenever they are relevant. But our guests can also take those questions as they come in as well. So we'll have time for questions at the end if you prefer that. I'll also be recording this webinar and posting it to our social media accounts and on our website at www.vpirg.org/COVID-19. Bit of a mouthful. And on there you can access this webinar as well as other ones and other relevant resources in relation to the coronavirus. So without further ado, I'll introduce our wonderful guests. We have Jenna Koloski from the Vermont Council on Rural Development and Carrie Stahler of Green Mountain United Way. They'll be focusing largely on our statewide organizing. And then we have Monique Priestly, an organizer in the Upper Valley, and Rebecca Stone, who is organizing communities in the White River Valley. And they'll be focusing more on local action. So thank you all for being here. And with that, I will pass the torch to Jenna.
Great, thanks, Maeve. Really appreciate it. Can everyone hear me okay? My internet connection sometimes is unstable where I live. Good? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. That's great. I also apologize for any toddler noise in the background. That's my life these days. Yeah, so quick overview. So I'm the Community and Policy Manager with the Vermont Council on Rural Development. In normal times, VCRD is essentially we serve as a neutral convener of public process. We work to bring, primarily the core of our work is to bring communities together around the state. We've worked with about 75 different communities on processes to identify priorities for action and then to help communities connect to the resources they need to get things done that they choose to work on. As you can imagine, we're constantly working with new communities, convening groups of 200, 300 people in any given town. That's on hold right now, you can imagine. So our work has shifted in a pretty significant way really rapidly in the last couple of weeks in response to what's going on with this pandemic. Early on, we kind of just started to see these incredible community efforts cropping up around the state. Monique Priestly, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, Rebecca Stone, Catherine Sims up in the Kingdom, Mindy Blank helping to organize with the community resilience organizations. Emily and Montpelier was a key leader early on. So there was this group of folks that were really starting to help share some practices in communities coming together to help support each other through this challenging time. And so VCRD, we are, like I said, a convener and a connector. We both help to connect community members together, but then also help to bridge regional, statewide, federal resources down to the community level and back and forth that way. And so we kind of felt like there was a role for us to play in this work that's going on in response to this crisis that our communities are facing. And so we've kind of stepped into this role. You know, we're really working in partnership with these regional partners and learning from them and learning from folks on the ground. But what we've been doing is just to help convene and connect community organizations, community coalitions that are cropping up to organize primarily, in some cases, what you'd call mutual aid networks, where people are offering help, people are asking for help, and these groups are helping to connect those folks so that people can access what they need, but also helping their community members to connect to regional resources, you know, food shelves, neighbor-to-neighbor programs, and then the statewide resources that are available. So that's the role we've been playing. We've been convening some weekly Zoom calls for these organizers to get together, to share best practices, to share what's going on in their community and also the needs that they have. We've also worked with the partners that I mentioned to put together a toolkit for organizers that are pulling together these groups in their communities. We started to hear, you know, that folks were looking for volunteer protocols, that people were looking at how do we best connect to regional resources, how do we do grocery delivery in a safe way that supports the community but keeps our volunteers safe. And so these questions were cropping up, and so we created an early toolkit that points people to kind of step-by-step guidance around what you might consider as you're pulling together a local or regional effort. We're also convening some conversations at the kind of resource provider level. We had a call today to bring people together to think about what's going on at that regional and statewide level and think about how we can, I don't want to use the word seamless because I don't think it's going to be seamless, but how we can better bridge those different areas where work's going on. So, you know, I guess my key message is around how to plug in. You know, it feels like right now our work is to build this network, right? You can imagine there's probably, we know of maybe 60 groups around the state that are covering either communities or regions. You know, at this point, there's probably other groups out there that are doing the work that aren't connected in, and then there's probably some towns where efforts are just getting started or where there aren't local efforts going on to organize. And so we're also thinking about ways like this to get the word out and say, hey, if you're looking for support, if you are interested in starting something up in your town, if you're interested in just plugging in and volunteering to an existing network in your town, here are the ways you can do that. So a couple of things, you know, if you're thinking about how can I plug in and help in my community during these times, you know, the first thing is I would love to invite you, if any of you on this call are currently organizing in your community or connected to these groups that are cropping up to support your neighbors, I would invite you to connect with us and join into this network of folks that are coming together around the state. I think, Maeve, if you could, I think probably the link to the VCRD, the Council on Rural Development, has a web page that points to the toolkit I mentioned. And there's also a form there where you can sign in to be involved in these weekly phone calls or ask us for, looks like Monique just linked it in the chat, where you can ask for support from the Council on Rural Development if your group is coming together, but you need a little help around meeting facilitation or online meeting tools, or thinking about who should we connect to around food resources? Who are the people that we could ask for help? We're happy to help in any way we can. We are not an organization that has all the answers. We don't own any of this, but we have connections that we could help you make and could help to work through some strategies to get started. So if you're already organizing, I invite you to plug in. If you're looking for a way to just volunteer, I would encourage you to do a couple of things. One is to look into whether there's an existing organizing group in your community today. What we don't want to see is 5 different groups organizing in Huntington, right? We want to see coordinated efforts. And so there is a spreadsheet, and maybe Monique, you could link to that sheet too if you have it readily available, that you can visit to see if there's something going on in your town now. And I'd encourage you to reach out to those folks if there is something going on in your town and you'd like to volunteer to help. In some cases, there's links to forms you can fill out there, or just reaching out to that point person on the spreadsheet is a great way to do it. Also, in that toolkit that I mentioned, there's a spreadsheet that links to regional and statewide efforts already going on today. You'll hear probably Monique and Rebecca share that there are existing efforts that are working on getting meals and food to your communities. There are existing efforts to plug volunteers into different organizations. So we've compiled a list of statewide resources and regional resources that you can visit to see what might be already going on in your region. But if there aren't things going on today, and you're someone that is interested in maybe getting something started in your community, I would encourage you to check out that toolkit that I mentioned that Monique linked to, and also to reach out to me and to the Vermont Council on Rural Development. We are happy to think with you about getting started in your community, a good place to start, and people that you could connect to help get that work going. So I'll leave it there, and we could hear from some more concrete efforts going on, but happy to take questions now or at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Carrie has joined us yet, but I think generally the biggest takeaway there is that there's a lot of efforts going on, from organizations like VCRD and others who are already working on this type of stuff. So plugging into their actions and where they need people can be really, really helpful. So yeah, check out those links and pass it on to Monique.
Yeah, thanks. So Monique Priestly, I live in Bradford, Vermont, and I'm the executive director for the Space on Main. It's a co-working space, community space, which is not open right now. So I've taken as much as I can. I've been doing webinars and things like that, but and then otherwise, really refocusing my time to just helping at the community level with trying to organize mutual aid efforts and trying to also bridge the gap with the municipality between volunteers and that group. So yeah, and I think so I've had some organizing for Bradford, but also then just our rural Vermont. All the surrounding towns don't necessarily have like a concrete region they belong to, or they might belong to several. They may or may not have strong municipal kind of community engagement and things like that. So kind of also advising towns around us that also just want to get something started but don't know how. I think a big thing for me is that I think I've been on like 25 boards at this point of like town, regional, and statewide organizations. So including quite a few commissions for the town. Which I even serve on now. So that relationship with the municipality has been there. And then with regional organizations that are working on this, like VCRD. So it's all very interesting because it's all very interconnected in many different ways. So just outside of COVID, I encourage everybody to get involved with the general community, not just as part of an emergency response, but as part of your life. So I think as far as work being done on the ground right now, so I had reached out to the select board and our emergency management director just to see if they were doing anything, if they had an emergency management plan, and if not, if I was stepping on toes by suggesting we do something. And so that I already had a relationship with both of them on different commissions, so that was fine. And basically just pulled together probably a group of 30 different people from different sectors. So making sure that we had people that could represent access to food, the healthcare center, the select board, our state rep, community action type groups, the library, the schools, that kind of stuff. So we have really 12 different kind of task forces that we meet weekly on a Zoom call, and basically each team has like a team captain, a point person that reports out on what's going on in their small group of 3 to 5 people. So if it's the health group, then we have somebody from a couple people from the local health clinic, a couple people from the local all of the different mental health facilities, anybody who can talk to like pharmaceutical, what's going on in pharmacies and if they're open. And so they kind of get together on their own or in a Google Doc, and then they report back out to the whole group. And then at that time, like anybody on the call can ask them questions as well. But we've been keeping that, we've had 30 people on and 12 different groups, but we've been keeping it to under an hour. So it's been going well. So that's kind of been going on there. We have another group like as part of that that's doing just focusing on things like a business directory to see what's still open and to provide resources to businesses. There's a lot of just adapting as we go. Nobody, like, I know kind of enough of what goes on in town to know the relationships a little bit, which is beneficial, but at the same time, like everybody, I'd say there's a lot of leeway for learning in this environment, and everybody's been pretty patient with that. So as part of a second group, part of a task force of that bigger group is just volunteer coordination. So I'm leading that. And so we sent out, you've probably seen the mutual aid volunteer and need request type forms. And many towns are doing it differently. I've been basically copying everything that Rebecca's doing in Bethel. So you'll hear from Rebecca. But so the volunteer form went out. We had, I think, like 115 people sign up from all different towns. It wasn't necessarily just Bradford. And I've basically been sending the people from other towns to their respective town teams at this point, because they have them, and then breaking down the volunteer coordination into, I think I have 8 different, so we have about 75 people in Bradford now. So I have 7 like leads that will each have 10 people assigned to them. And we're meeting weekly and really kind of, so we have, people will submit needs to a needs form like a Google Sheet. There's also a Google Voice phone number that can be used. And then we're really actually operating a help desk using Freshdesk. So needs will go into that as kind of like a ticket that you would submit to like your, say your wireless carrier if you have a support request. So that's kind of how we're handling that. And the teams of 10 will basically, like, the lead will claim an item that they want their team to handle and then work with their team to make sure somebody does it, and then let us know when it's done. There's lots of little pieces to the volunteer coordination that we've been working on. One is like a volunteer guide to let them know things like wash your hands, don't go into somebody's house, like call them ahead of time, figure out if you can just coordinate everything on the porch, keeping a distance of 6 feet away. If you become sick at all, that you should stop volunteering. And then things that came up like, if you call somebody, use *69 to hide your number as a volunteer. Things like volunteer liability, which we've been navigating with the town and with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns to figure out the correct way and who's covered and things like that. Yeah, I guess, and just working on waivers and yeah, and just we've been using Google Groups as like a listserv for all of our volunteers and a Slack channel, so everybody feels like they have a communication outreach.
That's great. I know I got a question via email from one of our members from Barry about opportunities for volunteer engagement for older folks over 70. That maybe it's not going outside, or is there something you can do from in your home?
Yeah, so a few things that have been great. So on the needs survey we have anything from like picking groceries and like helping with animal care and meal delivery, but then we have peer-to-peer support. So we have basically some people who either are autoimmune, have immuno like response they have to be aware of, or are elderly and can't leave. So they're joining. We have on our needs thing whether or not you want to call from somebody and whether or not you need like somebody to reach out just to see if you're okay. I also had a volunteer who is going to just start kind of like a pen pal chain list. So somebody can say like, I need a letter from somebody, or my neighbor seems really lonely and she might like just are you okay card, or my neighbor's an emergency responder, can you write them a thank you card? So there's people doing that kind of thing. And also the leads that are coordinating all the other people are all people who can't leave their house. And so they're just helping in that coordination way. Yeah.
That's great. I also remember Rebecca mentioning on a phone call we were on the other day that a great thing to do is to get your neighbors onto Front Porch Forum if they're not already, because there are so many great resources that are posted there. So that's another wonderful thing we can do. But thank you. If anyone else has questions for Monique, definitely. Oh, looks like Katie sent one in. Are there any financial resources for municipalities or local mutual aid groups for online tools like Freshdesk?
So yeah, the first part is actually just that Freshdesk is completely free for like their base level. So that's why I'm actually using it. But we were, so I don't know, Rebecca, if you, or Jenna, I think there are a number of kind of financial resources like the grassroots.
One, and Rebecca, actually, you probably know more about this than I do, but I will say, but New England Grassroots Environmental Fund, and they've actually reached out to us to encourage us to actively share that they are offering small grants of up to $1,000 for local, explicitly for groups that actually aren't organized and aren't 501c3s. They want to support local organizations doing this work.
That's great. Could you post like the link to that information or something in the chat if possible?
I could find that.
There are a couple other good funds out there as well. Vermont Community Foundation has Spark grants, which are slightly larger than the Grassroots Funds grants, but also geared toward community programs and projects like this. Ben & Jerry's Community Foundation offers some monthly grants that are rolling. So take a look around. There are definitely good resources out there.
Yeah, well, with that, we can pass it on to you, Rebecca, to talk some more about community partnerships and civic infrastructure.
Yeah, so I'm Rebecca Stone. I live down in Bethel and wear a number of hats. It's a little bit dizzying sometimes. So in my day job, when it's not coronavirus time, I'm a consultant. I have a small practice called Community Workshop, and we actually work across North America doing a lot of community engagement and planning work, supporting nonprofits in towns with program development and a lot of creative placemaking. So actually, this is an interesting challenge for me to be in because suddenly the work we do, which people often don't really get, is very relevant. And I also do it here on the ground in Bethel. So I landed in town probably 12 years ago, spent a couple of years commuting in and out and didn't know anyone until Tropical Storm Irene hit. And it hit Bethel very hard, not just in terms of storm damage, but really shining a light on some real dysfunction here in the community, in some ways that we were not set up to respond to a disaster like that. So a lot of the past 10 years for me have been really trying to intentionally connect with the community more and build the systems and the qualities that we knew we would need to respond to a future disaster. So I will just give you a quick snapshot of some of that backstory. Monique did a great job of kind of describing what community response looks like, and it is very similar here in Bethel. We've taken a really similar path to Bradford in terms of approaching all the different groups and organizations, trying to get them talking to each other, figuring out where the gaps are and what needs to be done, and working together very well. So in terms of where we were at the end of Irene, there were a couple of things that were really lacking in Bethel that caused problems for us. One was strong leadership that actually wanted to see community members engaged and was willing to work with other community groups and partners. Another was communication channels, ways to get the word out to people who might need help or want to volunteer. Those just really didn't exist, especially if you hadn't lived in town for a long, long time. And there was no can-do spirit, really. Individual people certainly had it and worked really hard, but as a community, we didn't really have a sense of shared identity or a shared sense that we could come together and make things happen. So a lot of what we've done over the last 10 years has been these little pockets of mostly small activities led by different people. Someone's starting up a fall festival, somebody's starting a neighborhood response program, the Conservation Commission and rec committees building trails. And I've worked with a group called Bethel Revitalization Initiative that's taken a lot of creative placemaking projects into this. We started a free pop-up university and did a better block project to try to remake the Main Street. And so all of these things sort of just started happening, but at least for our group, it's been very intentionally an experiment to see what would happen if we tried to get community members meeting neighbors who they don't necessarily agree with and really focusing on building relationships, trust. What if we tried to get community groups collaborating more, tried to create communication channels so we'd have an email list? And it's been pretty fascinating seeing that that's worked. The Bethel today responding to coronavirus is a completely different community than the one that didn't do so well responding to Irene. So everything I've just talked about is really what I call civic infrastructure, and work on that a lot with the communities that are clients in my consulting practice. We know how important built infrastructure is, roads and water and sewer, to getting us where we need to go and making a lot of things possible in our lives. We know that green infrastructure is really important in communities today to have functioning ecological systems, but very few communities actually intentionally work to build civic infrastructure, the systems and the trust and the relationships and communication channels that let communities solve problems. So I think we're seeing now that a lot of the communities that have done that, whether intentionally or not, are doing pretty well responding. The ones that haven't invested in that a whole lot are maybe a little bit slower. And so I'll just close by saying, I think if you're looking to jump in, I'd encourage you to take that long view. This is one moment and one disaster. We don't know how long it's going to go or what we're going to need to do to respond. We do know it's not the only one we're ever going to face. We're going to have a whole lot more challenges ahead. So as you're responding now, think about projects and actions and things you can do that build that infrastructure for the future, that really will strengthen relationships, create a lot of trust, increase communication and collaboration, build up community spirit, and a sense that you can really tackle big problems. We have a lot of resources on our website for this as well, and I need to throw up some more, including some kits and free resources for those really simple little placemaking projects that can just start the ball rolling, and some that are a little bit more around best practices and how you might work with partners, things like that. So I'll share that link too.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think it's really important to be thinking about how we're going to strengthen our communities, make them more resilient for future disaster relief. And finally, I will pass it on to Carrie of Green Mountain United Way to talk about how to plug into some of their work.
Hey everybody, thanks so much. It's really nice to follow Rebecca because she led in really nicely what I'm going to talk about. And part of what we get to see as a United Way is that Vermont is already doing a lot of really amazing things, right? One of the reasons that we can all sit on this phone call is because we have organizations that pull us all together. And VCRD has really stepped in and helped to pull a lot of communities together who weren't already connected. But I think one of the really neat things that I get to see every day is how folks are already connected and how organizations are already filling a lot of the gaps, or already doing a lot of the work that is really necessary during a crisis like this, which is a unique crisis, one that we haven't seen before. It's not a flood or a blizzard or something that passes quickly. It's an ongoing situation where we all have to have a little stamina. And so my message today is look before you leap. It's to stop and take a breath and take a moment to look at what's already happening in our communities and what's already successful. As United Ways in Vermont, we have spent decades building relationships with nonprofit organizations who are on the ground serving Vermonters. Most of the time, those folks are the most vulnerable Vermonters. There are systems in place to help seniors. There are systems in place to help people in recovery. There are systems in place to help families and children. There are rightly a lot of systems with layers in place for those folks because they need protection, and it is easy to accidentally cause harm when you're trying to cause good. So I would say really keep in mind that the best place to start is with something that may already exist, right? If you want to help deliver meals to seniors, the best people to ask is the local area agency on aging. It's the people who already serve those seniors, who have a background check process in place. They have procedures. As an organization have sat down to decide what the right protocol is so that you're following safety standards so that we're not sharing COVID-19 with our senior population completely by accident through the best of intentions to help bring them food. You know, similarly, there are a lot of organizations who are making and distributing meals, and there's a huge network of this, and it's really overwhelming information. As a matter of fact, I think I spent the entire first year I worked for Green Mountain United Way just going, who does that? Do that too? What else does, who? And it was like almost like a giant map I had to put together in my head. So I'm here to say that that already exists, and you don't need to crawl inside my head to find it. All of the United Ways in the state of Vermont have a volunteer network of some sort. They have helped put together over the years of working with nonprofit organizations. One of the great places that people can look is at the sites for each of those United Ways. So there are, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 7 United Way organizations in the state of Vermont. Some of them cover one county. Lamoille County and Addison County are their own organizations. Green Mountain United Way, we're the geographically largest United Way. We cover 5 counties in central Vermont and the Northeast Kingdom. And really, we cover some of the most rural territory in the state. So in a situation like this, what we're looking to do is help people in the community connect with those nonprofit partners that we've been working with to support for years. And we do that, you know, through the relationships that we have already built, through phone calls like this, and through our online volunteer connection database, where we have opportunities and contact information for close to 75 nonprofit organizations. A lot of them have really detailed descriptions of what they do and who they are. Some of them don't. But it will help. I think it's a great starting place for a lot of folks who are looking at this and going, I really want to help, and I want to help right now. Sort of get a feel for what the options might actually be. You know, what are ways that the community is still working or able to work with all of the changes that have taken place in the past 2 to 4 weeks? Who is out there and doing that work, and how can you help elevate and magnify what they're doing while also, you know, using your own energy in a really good way? There are some other organizations throughout the state who are doing that kind of work too, and we're working to connect with them. There are AmeriCorps group. There are sometimes it's municipal groups coming together, like in central Vermont, Washington, Northern Orange Regional Response Command Center has come together, and it's actually a network of nonprofit organizations who are working together to solve this problem, but they've sort of created this other entity in emergency response. So we saw a lot of stuff like that during Irene. I suspect that we'll see those things again, where it's all of these little civic organizations, and we're trying to glue them together to create a regional response. The other piece I want to just make sure everyone's aware of is that because Vermont is small, most of the service work done on the ground is done regionally. So like if you're looking for a food shelf and you're in Stannard, Vermont, there's no food shelf in Stannard, Vermont. Does that mean there doesn't need to be one? No, but right now there isn't. And the closest food shelf that's served by the food bank is in Hardwick, which is, I don't know, like 20 minutes away. No one's supposed to travel. What do you do? So a lot of communities are looking at situations like that and looking at how to really localize those resources. And again, our nonprofit partners are the ones who can 100% help tell you how to do that. Vermont Food Bank has resources to start a food shelf in your community. The Area Agency on Aging has information about how to deliver meals and how to prepare meals for seniors. So if you're looking at your town level about how to make this work for people in your town or in your neighborhood, please use our nonprofits as resources. They're there for that, and they know how to do this, and they would love for you to do it in a way that was efficient and didn't require a steep learning curve. Yeah, so thank you. I think that's great, and I'm really excited to see so many people on here, and so many people I know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think that was a really great point to end on, that there are so many people, especially here in Vermont, people value community so much, and there's so much going on already to try to get people the resources, the things that they need during these really difficult times. So plug into, your United Way and check out that toolkit to find out what you can be doing. I think that's the biggest takeaway. But would anyone else, any of our hosts, like to say a final word? It doesn't seem like there's any questions, but if you do have questions, send them in now if you'd like. No? Okay, well, we can end it there then. I'm gonna be posting this to our social media, hopefully in the next hour or so, so that we can share it far and wide and make sure that as many people are plugged in as possible. Yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Maeve.
Thanks, Maeve.
Okay.